Register now for the 2024 Agri-Pulse Food and Ag Issue Summit in California. The event will offer participants a full day of presentations and panel discussions. You can hear from members of the California Legislature, food and agriculture leaders, along with industry experts and academics. This summit takes place on June 4th in Sacramento and through our virtual experience. See the latest information and register today under the Events tab at agripulse.com.
Welcome back to another episode of Meet the Lawmaker. We are joined this week with Representative Sharice Davids, representing the 3rd District of Kansas. And to kick off the interview, just tell me a little bit more about your district and why agriculture is important to it.
Oh, yeah. Well, agriculture is important to the whole state of Kansas, but in the Kansas 3rd, a couple of things I would say. One is that we have, after the redistricting in the 3rd district, a lot more farmers and producers than we used to have. I mean, we've always had folks who are doing work in like crop insurance and financial services for farmers, but there's definitely a lot more farmers and producers in the district now. We've got all of Johnson County, Miami County, Anderson County, Franklin County, and then a little bit of Wyandotte County. And these are all in the Kansas City metro area for folks who are watching that aren't familiar with the area. But yeah, it's actually been really cool to learn about all the stuff that's going on, because I would never have described myself as an ag expert prior to last year. I mean, I still wouldn't describe myself that way, but I'm certainly learning a lot. And I got onto the ag committee because of the sheer volume of farmers and producers that are in the district now. And that's everything from like row crops to specialty crops to folks who are we've got dairy, we've got folks who are, of course, making a good steak. But I think that the ag sector is so important in the state of Kansas, and for the 3rd district, we both grow, produce, and transport tons of the goods that are coming out of Kansas, and so it's actually like a really holistic piece of the 3rd district, if that makes sense.
So let's expand on that, because your district does span across many different groups and landscapes, both urban and rural.
Yeah.
So how do you go about balancing that dynamic?
One thing I think is so interesting about Kansas is how many like family farms we still have. I don't know the exact numbers, but we have more kind of like longer term family farms than, intergenerational and that sort of thing. What's been so interesting to see is folks that I visit with who are, living in the suburbs in Johnson County or in the more kind of urban areas of the district, still have a lot of really close family ties to ag, even if they're not in that sector. And I think that it's actually because of those kinds of long-term relationships that it helped me meet a bunch of people. And then of course, like the Kansas Farm Bureau and the soybean folks and the corn folks, like a bunch of people have been really just helping me figure out how to meet as many people as possible, and really helped when I did like the Farm Bill listening tour that I did. I think when it comes to bridging, I'm not sure if like a bunch of that stuff was already there and because of those relationships, and so it actually made it a lot easier for someone like myself who's really had a steep learning curve to just get connected with as many people as possible.
So you mentioned your Farm Bill listening sessions that you completed last year, or the tour that you completed last year. So tell me a little bit more about what you learned while on that tour.
How many minutes do we have? No, I'm kidding. So it was probably one of the most fun things I've gotten to do since being in Congress. No one ever thinks of like Congress and fun together. So I got the chance to visit with folks who are, growing like specialty crops and just got started, new and emerging farmers, all the way to people who are 5th generation farmers in Kansas and are, in doing row crops and that sort of thing. We had so many different listening sessions where we tried to really bring together as many different types of growers, producers, and then the folks who are, like the co-op, like the Ottawa co-op, who helps farmers in so many different ways, whether it's like in their purchasing or helping get their goods out to people. So I feel like I got a better sense of what is being grown, but also what it takes to go all the way from getting seeds in the ground, doing that in the best way possible, while like working with the USDA and Farm Service Agency and that sort of thing, all the way to learning a bit more about how much we're exporting. Like Kansas exports all over the world, like we're feeding people all over the world. So did that answer the question?
It does, it does. And to kind of expand on that too, what were some of the challenges that you heard that you want to then take and try to improve in the next Farm Bill?
Yeah, so in some of my meetings with the folks who are working with like the Farm Service Agency, those conversations were really interesting because I got to hear both from the USDA side and about the issues that people are trying to navigate. Whether it's, in Kansas, there's a lot of folks who are navigating the drought and trying to figure out how to keep their yields up when we're dealing with years and years of drought, because it's not just this one year, and then there are some parts of the district that are actually dealing with flooding. And so just trying to figure out how we best support folks, whether they're dealing with drought or flooding, and then making sure that things like the crop insurance program is actually effective, and then making sure that we have a lot of folks who participate in things like the conservation programs that the USDA has, the EQUIP program, people who are trying to make investments into their farms so that the next generation can continue to farm that land. And some of the challenges are the increase in fertilizer costs, seeing that like quadruple in price. And, I know that, of course, there are lots of factors. Certainly Ukraine, the war over there has had an impact. But, I think that's why it's important for us to keep not just working on the Farm Bill, which we are still working on, but also on things that are going to help with our supply chains. And I sit on transportation and infrastructure too, and like trying to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep our supply chain moving. Those are the kinds of issues that I've been hearing about. I mean, I'm sure I've heard about a lot of other ones too, but those are the big ones that I can say.
Mm-hmm. And so you are one of 2 Native American women who serve in Congress. And so how are you hoping to bring more awareness and resources to tribal nations in the next Farm Bill?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. There's like a Native farmer coalition that brings together folks who do work in Indian country, which is the term we use in Congress, that are doing work in Indian country with farmers and ranchers and that sort of thing. And they have done a really good job of helping to bring tribal leaders out to DC to meet with, me and other folks on the committees. I know Dusty Johnson is actually, because there's a lot of tribes in South Dakota, and he's one of the people that's done a really good job of making sure that those of us on the Ag Committee particularly get the chance to connect with those tribal folks to make sure that we understand, because the land situation is different on reservations and that sort of thing. So but it's certainly a big topic of conversation.
Would you say that just including more of the leadership from tribal nations is more of the challenge right now, or is it adequately making sure that any resources that they need are met? Like what's kind of where's the bridge lacking in that?
Yeah, I think sometimes. So I just mentioned Dusty Johnson. And there are a number of my colleagues, both on the Republican and Democratic side, who have probably a deeper understanding of the relationship between tribal governments and the federal government. But probably usually the biggest hindrance to getting a new policy or improving policy is just the education around that. And that's certainly not through malice or anything. It's a complicated area, and so one of the benefits of having so many tribal leaders and members meeting with tribal leaders and folks working in that space is so beneficial is because it's usually like an education hurdle more than anything else. Because even, in the last Farm Bill, there were a couple things that were pretty beneficial to supporting the work that's already happening in Native communities. And that's both on the ag side and on the nutrition side, because there are a couple of nutrition programs that are included in the Farm Bill that there's a pilot that's actually been very, very successful, and now it's just making sure that people know that the pilot has been successful, and that we get the pilot program a little more permanent, where tribes are implementing they're already doing the nutrition assistance programs and managing that. And it actually takes a little bit of a burden off the federal government because the tribal governments are able to do it.
So before coming to Congress, you served as a White House fellow under President Barack Obama. Mm-hmm. How did this experience shape your view of politics?
Well, so that it's, what's interesting is I actually was here. I was doing the White House Fellows Program. I was in DC at the end of the Obama administration, the beginning of the Trump administration. And so I saw the transition, which was really, really interesting because, I gotta say, this is true of the Department of Transportation where I was housed, or like USDA. The real magic of that is the career civil servants who are working in, of course, the DC offices, but really out in the communities. And the thing that I saw was how, it's amazing to see the federal government is the largest organization in the world, and because of the expertise that we've got in our USDA or DOT, they really were able to keep things moving along.
So to wrap up our conversation today, just tell me a little bit more about your family.
Well, I love my mom. I'm an Army brat. I was raised by a single mom. My mom was in the Army for 20 years, from before I was born until I got out of high school, a little bit after I got out of high school. She raised me and my two brothers by herself. I have a brother who is making it so my mom gets to live her best grandma life. So I've got nieces and that sort of thing. And I when I'm not doing this, when I'm not at work, we're usually like I'm doing something with my family, whether it's like an escape room or I just tried axe throwing the other day. So
are you pretty good at it?
I mean, I wouldn't say I was the best, but I thought I did pretty good.
All right.
Yeah, I hit the bullseye quite a few times. So, but yeah, no, I have a great family that, like, fortunately for anyone who does public service, like being able to spend time with your family actually is like very grounding. So, you know, people often, you know, thank me for my service and that sort of thing. And I'm like, man, if it weren't for my mom and my brothers and, you know, my support system, I don't think anybody can do this stuff without that. So, yeah.
Well, that's all we have time for today. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.